Hi, I'm Kimberlyn, and welcome to Just Breathe. What a concept, right? Giving ourselves permission to let breath be the only task at hand. Why? Because when we breathe well, we live well. And by that, I mean that we have the space to check in on our capacity. We pause for interoception, for introspection. We see what is in this moment. We test out the conditions and the context of how we're living. Or, literally, we just breathe. But in that pause, we can cultivate deeper knowing, clearer knowing, and greater intimacy between the mind, the body, and the breath herself. So welcome to Just Breathe. I am so glad that you're here, and I'm so proud of you for making this a commitment to your daily living. Find a comfortable seat, and we'll begin. How are you?
I'm alive, but I'm not good.
Mentally, physically, spiritually, all of the above? Okay.
All the above.
Okay. Then hear this for what it's worth. I'm proud of you for showing up. When life gets overwhelming, a survival strategy that can work is to retreat for a time. But eventually we have to come back to the land of the living. So our Just Breathe and our Just Pause practice, for that matter, are intended to help us carve out that little bit of space for clearer seeing. So welcome to Just Breathe, and believe me when I say that's the only requirement. Everything else is optional. But when we can pause to breathe, we can begin to choose how we breathe, how we live. So find a comfortable sit, lengthen through the crown of the head, and then soften, yield into the skeletal frame of your body. You might find that there's a tension, a support tension. Tensegrity is what we call it in the yoga therapy world, but it's kind of connecting a line from the base of the occiput, the back of the head, crisscrossing to the opposite tip of your shoulder blade, and then crisscrossing again to the sits bones of the bottom of your pelvis. And that kind of crisscross helps bring us into this axial extension. Still some soft curves in the lumbar, the thoracic, and even the cervical spine. But for the most part, we've stacked the bones to hold the weight so that all of our energy, all of our attention can be redirected to the flow of breath. Now, as you steady your breath, as you settle, I want to invite the metaphor of spring, of opening, of blooming, or as the title of our poem, blossoming. Blossoming by Janet Arnold Grich. In the beginning, with each unraveling of the mat, we are anxious to add to our garden, to gather the beautiful buds and coax each asana to open quickly. Feet in the dirt we stand, sometimes for the first time, connecting earth to muscle and muscle to sky. The energy of an immense lineage, pulsing with promise. But as the poses settle, as we settle, we find that yoga's true gift is not about more, but less. The outline of the poses remain the same. Yet when the space between is fed, when ease replaces expectation, when patience replaces petals, we find that the asanas are no longer about holding on, but about letting go. And in that release, without judgment or force to impede, breath floods in, releasing the mind and freeing the heart. Through yoga, we find that core of serene nothingness and learn that in letting go, we gain everything. If winter is the season of introspection, the season of going in, then spring is the season of finding our way back out, blossoming, blooming, connecting. But without the winter, for some, the cold, for others, the dark, for others, still just the time and space to retreat. We don't stay in winter. We don't stay in retreat. We begin again by stepping forth, by breaking through the soil, green little sprouts, until we can come to our full blossoming, our becoming. It's enough to show up. And just like the life cycle of our beautiful spring bulbs, most of their effort is hidden beneath the soil and the snow. And their blossoming is short-lived in comparison. And yet, do we not celebrate their beauty even more because of its fleetingness? We come to count on them showing up, to remind us, to invite us to also bloom, blossom, begin again. It begins right here, right now. Feel your breath. And maybe, like the roots of those buried bulbs, you can feel your roots reaching into the soil to gather what you need and draw it up. Inhale, soften, blossom open through the pelvic floor. Exhale, gather and draw up. Inhale, soften. Exhale, gather and draw up. Nourish your center. Nourish the Atman spark just by the nature of breathing. Take a few more of what I call the Dharma breath, this pelvic floor engagement to lift, and then the releasing, the softening, the opening. In some yogic traditions, this is more of a precursor breath to the Agnisara or Agnisara, depending on the lineage, how they pronounce it. But I like it as a completion, as a breath in and of itself. So notice how it feels for you. And then let that contraction subside and see if you can still feel a gentler, natural ebb and flow. As the belly softens, meaning the ribs diaphragm contracts, the belly softens, the pelvic floor also softens. And then as the diaphragm of the breathing retracts back up into its static state or its soft state, the pelvic floor engages to lift. And this is the natural ebb and flow. Some of you might even feel it in your throat, and still others of you might feel it, as I do, in my low back and sacrum. Now the pelvic doesn't move a lot, a couple of millimeters is all, but that doesn't mean you can't connect with it, to feel it, to be with it. Getting to know yourself is both the responsibility and the privilege of being alive. So now I want to bring in a little more attention to the flow of your breath. Steady it out and notice how long, with a steady count, how long it takes to inhale. And keeping that same tempo, how long it takes to exhale. This is just our temperature check, right? What is the temperature of our breath? Its volume, its pace, its texture. Is it sticky? Is it jagged? Is it smooth and supple? Now, if there's an unevenness of the in and the out, just notice that. We're going to move towards exaggerating unevenness, meaning an emphasis on the latter half, the exhale. So if you've got a 4 count, start to move towards 4 in, 6 out. We're going to increase that every few breaths just to find our own edge. If you're already at your edge, just stay with this mindful attention of the breath as it is. Welcome it just as it is and trust that that's enough to nourish you until your timing is right to blossom. If there's capacity, if there's tolerance, if there's desire, add on a count. Keeping the same pace. Add on 1 more count on the inhale and 2 more counts on the exhale. Repeat and see if you can gain that sense of ease in this new ratio. If you're in a 5 to 7 ratio, can you bump that towards a 5-8 ratio? If this edge causes you to lose your smooth rhythm, escalates a sense of panic or judgment, it's too much, back off. Listen to that inner wisdom of prana floating in and out of your being. Trust the signs of when it's right to break free, to tickle that edge, to push through like the first sprouts of spring. If Now is not the time for you to bloom and to blossom. That's okay. You need some extra time preparing, strengthening. And sometimes before the strengthening, we need to allow for the rest, the going in before we come out. Right, one more edge, if it's appropriate for you. Add on. Perhaps it's 6 to 9. This time, as you exhale, release that control. Come back to your easy breath. Notice what you notice. We don't have to have the solutions. We don't even have to have the questions. We just want to cultivate the permission. The permission to just breathe and let the questions arise. Let the curiosity be tickled by paying attention. The hands come to rest either at or on your heart and receive this blessing. May you breathe deeply, move freely, labor lovingly. May you live vibrantly. Namaste. Thank you so much.